Welcome back to 23-Minute Reads with me, Maya D. This is kind of like my virtual book club because in these short videos, I share with you my takeaways from my current reading. Right now, that is African American Dance. As a part of my 23 to 23 challenge, I'm reading 23 minutes per day, every day, as an action of self-love, as an investment into myself, and as a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. Hoping that you will join me along in this journey by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and dropping some comments down there in that comment section so that there's an actual dialogue going on. Having in mind that while I have several decades of experience as a dancer, an educator, and a curriculum writer, I am not the know-all be-all for this book. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue. Well, this week I read pages 217 through the end, and let me get my notes so I can give you my takeaways. Feel free to go ahead and like and subscribe while I get my notes. Also, drop a book, word, or emoji in the comments below just so I know who's here with me. Takeaway number 1 is Club Delux. Club Delux was a space in Harlem important to the history of African American music and dance, specifically jazz music and dance, because it is from this location that jazz music reached the homes of people across the nation via radio waves. Cab Calloway once said of this experience, and I quote, "The idea was to make whites who came to the club feel like they were being served by black slaves." End quote. Okay. Originally, the space was intended as a dance space to be managed by the boxer Jack Johnson. Club Delux was purchased by prominent gangster Oni Madden during the time of Prohibition in the United States. So for those of us not familiar with Prohibition, it's a period in time in the U.S. where there are very strict laws about the consumption, the making, the selling of alcohol. And during this time, Mr. Madden purchases Club Delux to use as a facility that can support his intended business. The club only allowed white patrons and was worked by a staff of all black employees. Duke Ellington once commented on how unfortunate it was that his loved ones couldn't actually see him perform because of the rules at the club. Eventually, some blacks would be admitted into the club. Under Madden's aesthetic, the club was a nod to the Southern plantation and was renamed the Cotton Club. That name might be familiar. Similar to the Apollo Theater and the Savoy, the Cotton Club is a significant venue in the history of African American music and dance. And I was surprised to learn that its original name was Club Delux. Surprised and happy that I found that out, because if you look at history, we see that locations of buildings and cities and towns and even countries change. So it is important to know those different names so that you know when you're hearing stories that those stories are about the same venue or the same experience. I hope that makes sense. Takeaway number 2 is bona fide skill. To borrow a quote from the book, Grassroots chapter, to borrow a quote from the book's Grassroots chapter. There, that's a little better. Here's the quote. "Where you dance said something about your skill." End quote. I've experienced dancers who don't appreciate the lived experience and the wisdom acquired by other dancers whose wisdom and learned experience happened outside of the studio setting. And I've always been a little confused about that, in that when you do field research, field analysis, or immersion experiences, it's not uncommon for those experiences to happen outside of the studio. So yeah, but let's talk about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The Learning at Home and Moving into the Streets section discusses the calculated process of study that often began in the home with informal intergenerational lessons coming from loved ones. So in your house, you might learn from your mother, your father, an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, or so forth, these foundational skills, these in dance and then take those skills out onto the streets. Rusty Frank describes dancing on the streets as integral to a dancer's learning experience, because dancers had to demonstrate bona fide skill to be successful on a street corner. Now, that is to say that the people in the neighborhood and on these corners understood the movement. They understood the technique required because it was familiar to them. So they wanted to see something that demonstrated that technique. Hope that makes sense. Similar to progressing through levels in a studio, dancers move from one street corner to the next. Of Philadelphia, LaVon Robinson commented that during the 1930s, you could see a different form of tap on different corners, on different street corners, and that competition was certainly present. A novice might begin at 25th and South before moving to 21st and 20th, where the dancers were more skilled, before ending up at around 1400. Try it again. At the 1400 block. Still messed it up. The 1400 block, where the expert dancers were. The informal street corner system still included assessment, competition, and presentation performance that allowed dancers the necessary recognition, visibility, and pay needed to progress from amateur dancer to professional dancer. Seems pretty systemized, calculated, structured, and pretty thorough to me. What do you say? Let me know in the comments below. Takeaway number 3 is Ernest Evans. As mentioned earlier in a video, dances were and are done in communities and a street corner for a period of time before they make it to the performance stage and or television. In the television dance for teens section of the grassroots chapter, I learned how much the movie Hairspray kind of was similar to real life. African American teenagers experienced a level of erasure via the televised show Bandstand. It has been documented that not only did African American teens find it difficult to get into the recording studio, even if they got into the recording studio, they might not have actually been recorded, and therefore their image, their person broadcasted into the homes of the nation. And this was a little icky in that one of the things you also see are the white dancers performing moves that are on screen that are very similar to the moves that the African American teens are performing in their basements and on those street corners. Notice the use of the term similar. The white teens are performing movements that are similar to what these African American teens are performing in their home settings. It wasn't uncommon for white teens to be encouraged by bandstand staff to claim that the movements that they were performing were their own inventions. Yeah. Both appropriation and approximation were present in the history of bandstand, as in the case of Ernest Evans, also known as Chubby Checker, a moniker developed by Dick Clark's wife. While the Baltimore version of the twist had already been done in the bandstand studio by both black and white teens, it had not been recorded. It had not been recorded because Dick Clark felt that it was inappropriate. The original twist song was recorded in 1958 by Hank Ballard and the Midnights. In 1960, Chubby Checker lip-synced his recorded version of the song, performed it, and taught a lesson for the twist that Clark felt was more appropriate. And I quote, "The one that Chubby Checker demonstrated on television had less hips and shoulder movement and came across as more wholesome." This section brought a level of clarity to me in relation to my personal life and my family history, because since I was a child, I have always absolutely loved the way that my grandmother does the twist. And I couldn't put my finger on it. Like I didn't have words to describe why it was different or what it was like, why it was different, why it looked and felt different to me than the versions that I saw on television and in the movies. But this section of the book gave me clarity. Now I know why. The one done by Chubby Checker that was spread through media help was a modification. It was an approximation of the one that my grandmother, who is Baltimore born and raised, was doing. Now it all makes sense. This book has given me additional insight on the twist. It's given me additional insight on how the South Carolina plantation impacted jazz dance and so much more. But I would love to hear what you learned and also what you would like us to read next. Please join me in the reading of our next book, which is going to be Giving Life to Movement by Tamara LaDonna Williams. Oh, and also, before you go, make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. But before you go, 2023 is already bringing about some changes. And one of those changes is that I have a new channel. It's called Maya D Specialist. There's a link in the description below. And I want to start that new book, Giving Life to Movement, on that new channel. So I hope that you follow me over there and let's enjoy some really great books, some really great times, and sharing of information. Stay blessed, spread a good word, and I'll see you again soon.